And as advertised, we will convene. I'm looking to see if we have some more folks coming. Scott's out there.
Yep. Yeah, he's here.
Okay. Call the meeting to order, and we do have a quorum present. So let's begin with introductions. I'm Jim Moore, first vice chair.
Hal Moffett, El Paso County.
Kevin Walker, citizen at large.
Scott Turner, Town of Raymond.
David Walker, City of Manitou Springs.
Fran Pitaro, Colorado Springs.
Paul Johnson, Colorado Springs.
Sharon Brown, City of Fountain.
Michelle Day, citizen at large.
Vince Russenack, citizen at large.
John Dick, Town of Monument.
Courtney Stone, citizen at large, sorry.
Boy, do I have timing or what?
Good time.
Rachel Beck, PPACG.
And in the audience,
Ken Prather, PPACG.
John McGinn, JDS Hydro.
Mark Bowley, JDS Hydro.
Ray Burgess with Woodland Park.
thank you. Hope everybody's had a chance to look at the agenda. Are there any amendments or adjustments? Or we do have one, and that has to do with item 11. The subcommittee headed by Al Creeley. Al has been out of town for, I guess, about 2 weeks now, and is just returning today, so the committee has not had a chance to meet since our last get-together. So we will be deferring that discussion and voting until the meeting at the end of December. I do want to remind everybody that just leaves a little additional time if you have not yet taken advantage of sending an advisory to Jacqueline with your interest, if you are so interested in serving as one of the officers of this august body. Please do so, and the committee will meet and bring forward their recommendations at the end of next month.
Question on that?
Yes, sir.
When somebody's term expires, like in May, they're not eligible, or can they be extended? They probably will go for second terms. How does that work each year?
That's a good question. I believe that the way it works is that we are under the bylaws 2 terms, and so you can submit your name for continued service in a second term, so there would not be an interruption in
But that would make you ineligible if, say, it came up in May and your term expires in May.
Well, if you're going to have it, go ahead.
We dealt with that at PPACG, or PPRTA also, where no one wanted to step up and take the chairmanship. Left us in a situation where the bylaws forced us to bring some nominees. We actually took it to the PPACG board and brought that to them with a request to extend the term of the existing president. It had to go to the board because it was in direct violation of bylaws, and so they could approve that on an ongoing basis, but we had to redo it every year.
I don't believe we have either of those problems.
Yeah.
No one who's term limited has volunteered to be on the executive committee, and we have more than enough nominees to fill the spots.
Okay.
Perfect.
Life is good. All right. Does that handle that, Vince?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments on the agenda? Okay, public comments from that is not reflected in the agenda. Hearing none, we'll move forward into approval of the minutes from the October 28th regular meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Are there any corrections or amendments or comments? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstained? Okay, we have 2 abstentions. 3 abstentions from people who were not here last time around. All right, thank you. I attended the board meeting on the 13th, and it was kind of interesting because, first of all, it started about a half an hour later than advertised. There was an executive session prior to that, and I don't think I wanted to be in the room for that either. They were discussing the review and evaluation of the executive director and the operation of the organization. I'd like to touch on a couple of the military updates because I think at least two of them are going to have some impact on our deliberations in the months and years ahead. First of all, it's nice news from the folks at Fort Carson that most of their soldiers will be home for the holidays, which is unusual. The representative from Fort Carson did allow us how they'll be rotating out again shortly thereafter. If you have not seen it yet, at the Air Force Academy, the new Character and Leadership Center is up, and you can see that spire from I-25. I would prefer that you keep your eyes on the road, but it is visible, and I've looked over there and seen it. I think important to us, Schriever is planning to increase their number of housing units from the present 240 to 330, and expressed some concern about the status of work on 94. We will see how that plays out. There were a number of requests, and not an extended discussion, but a kind of pointed discussion about some of the controls over speeding and passing and things like that. And then out at Peterson, they are already planning for the 15th anniversary of 9/11 next year, so something, a big landmark date for that, and who knows what lies between here and there. The board approved the following items without a great deal of discussion, if I recall correctly. The draft budget and work program for the PPACG was approved. There was a request, and they approved carryover of $129,000 for the Area Agency on Aging. The 2040 Regional Transportation Plan was approved after Craig provided his extremely impactful briefing, which I was sorry I missed last time. I was glad I saw it on the 13th. The project priorities list and evaluation criteria for 2017 through 2022 were approved using an option that included an averaging of staff, I think I've got this right, staff, the CAC, and TAC rankings. And the reason for that, and the staff basically said they could do with any of the various ones because they all racked out just about the same, just slight variations in the actual relative importance. And finally, tips 6 and 7 were approved by the board. And they nailed it at 90 minutes, which kind of surprised me, but they got it done. Any questions? Okay. Moving right along. We are at the item number 6.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I need to recuse myself for this matter.
All right. Do you note that, Jacqueline? Okay, thank you. Sterling Water Wastewater Lift Station Site Application. I learned a lot and even went online and took a look at it and stopped after about 3-4 maps. And I said, you'll explain this to us.
Well, I have somebody here who will. I'm Ken Prather, transportation planner here at PPACG, filling in for Rich Muzzy. He has accepted a position at the Sacramento Air Quality Management District to work on their ozone program. But the site application for the lift station at the Sterling Ranch Metropolitan District was halfway through the process, so I'm just kind of picking it up to shepherd it through. I do have Mr. McGinn, consultant working on that project, to answer any technical questions you have. But sewage is designed as much as possible to flow by gravity downhill to a treatment facility to minimize costs, periodically to get it over a hill or around some obstacle that's necessary to pump it back to a higher elevation, and that's what we call a sewage lift station. The PPACG Site Application Review Subcommittee has reviewed it. They're the ones that really dig into the nuts and bolts of the application. Is it complete? Is it understandable? are the pipes the right size, the pumps the right size, the backup power and alarm systems, the funding, all of those type of things that are involved in the site application that must go to the state for final approval before any construction can be started. PPACG, as the lead water quality management agency in this area, is one of the steps in the approval process. We make a recommendation to the state. As I say, the site application review subcommittee, the SARC, has reviewed it. They made their recommendation to the Water Quality Management Committee, which was to meet at 1:30 this afternoon, just before this meeting. And although we had expectations and promises that we would have a quorum, we did not get a quorum to show up. Of the members that were there, they had reviewed the document. Many of them were very familiar with it. Some of them were on the site application review subcommittee. And so we did discuss the response from the consultant to the recommendations and comments of the site application review subcommittee, and although we could not take a vote or do any type of formal action, the consensus of those present is that the responses adequately addressed the issues that had been raised. It was reported there by Mr. McGinn that the one signature that is still required from the Meridian District has not been obtained yet, and so any recommendation to the board should include a contingent, if it's a recommendation for approval, should include contingency upon obtaining that signature. The signature was obtained once before on a different form, and then the forms were changed, and so now it's necessary to get the signature again. So it's not that it's unknown to the agencies. That's kind of where we are in the process, and as I say, if you have any technical questions about the site application itself, I'm going to step aside and let the expert answer those questions.
Okay. Any questions for Ken at this point? All right. I'm seeing some head shakes, so.
Do you have any questions?
Please give us your name again and affiliation.
My name is Mark Voley, and I work for JDS Hydro. I'll give a quick overview of the project, and then if you all have any questions or would like a little bit more in depth, I can dive into it a little more. As Ken mentioned, it's a site application for a lift station that's going to be installed to serve the proposed Sterling Ranch development. Sterling Ranch development is located just east of town, kind of near Vollmer and Woodman Road. The lift station is located on the southwest side of the development. The vast majority of the development will gravity flow to this lift station. There's a small portion of it in the southeast that will likely gravity flow to a different lift station, but that will be determined in the future as development and design progresses. This lift station will transfer water or convey wastewater from Sterling Ranch to the existing Falcon lift station. Falcon lift station is relatively new. It was built a couple years ago. It's a great lift station, and it conveys water to two different treatment plants. One in the north is Woodman Hills, and one to the south is the Cherokee reclamation facility. And the wastewater from Sterling Ranch will be eventually conveyed to the Cherokee facility in the southeast. That's down southeast of Schriever Air Force Base. The force main is sized to convey the flows from full build-out for the development, but until we have the population to support that, we'll just have to manage the flows to make sure that we maintain minimum velocities in our force main so that we don't have solids settling in the pipe. And we did those calculations to ensure that we could maintain minimum flows throughout the various stages of development. Yes, if you go, I don't know if somebody has the
mouse and you can take over on the screen.
Oh, all right.
Cool.
Let's see.
Thank you.
So, it is generally in this area. Pioneer Sand, let me see if I turn this on. Pioneer Sand and Gravel has a facility out here, And the proposed lift station is located just east of Pioneer Sand and Gravel. So it's somewhere in this parcel.
Where is the Sterling Ranch, the whole area?
So the Sterling Ranch area this is very approximate, but Volmer Road here is the northwest boundary, and then it doesn't extend all the way down to Woodman. It extends down maybe to this area approximately, and over to somewhere in here. Again, that's very approximate. I believe there's a PDF circulated in Appendix B, or Exhibit B, and the PDF has a vicinity map that shows it in a little more detail than what I just described up here.
How many homes?
At full build-out, they're projecting, I believe, 5,300 single-family equivalents. The lift station is sized for 4,700, and I mentioned that some of the development will gravity flow to a different area that'll be determined as design progresses and as development progresses.
Scott?
And this may seem like a strange question, but I do have a reason for answering it. We're noticing that, or at least I noticed, you've got James Morley listed as the manager and president of Sterling Ranch.
Yes.
Is that any relation to the Morley down in Fountain area?
I'm not entirely sure. John, do you know?
Apple Tree Golf Course?
I assume it's the same one. It's the same individual.
And are you familiar with the financial issues that were created down in that particular part of El Paso County?
I don't know that Apple Tree has any relevance to this. I'm sure they're separately financed. So,
How much financial reliance is this project on Mr. Morley's ability to produce cash flow?
probably not much. It's probably, the funding is going to be based upon Metro District bonds that would finance the public improvements.
And that's as the property is developed and as the
It would
home
be
is developed?
before the property is developed. It would actually be prior to development, prior to construction of the actual facilities.
Be applying for those bonds, correct? He would be the person who would be applying for those
He would
bonds?
not be the person, he is on the board of directors for the Metropolitan District that would be the applicant.
So he would be a signer on the bond?
No, I don't believe he would. He would only be a signer as a member of the board. If the Metro District, it's a Metro District, so it's a governmental entity that would be assigned a bond.
Familiar with him, so.
And where is the waste treatment plant that the sewage is going to?
It is. Yeah, it's southeast of Schriever, which is. No, that's too far. This is Schriever here, I believe. And then it's off of Drennan Road, I believe. And that's, is this it?
Nailed it.
Okay. It's off Drennan Road, pretty far to the southeast. That.
We'll get my glasses on.
Yeah, this is. Oh, yeah, it's right here. This is the Drennan and Milne, the Cherokee.
Could you back out?
I
just a little
marked
bit so we can
that.
see?
Then
The discharge from there goes,
they have a groundwater recharge facility that is actually located farther east of there, and so they built these basins that they discharge the effluent into, and it percolates into the groundwater. Yes, sir.
Can you show us where the Arvest property is?
Yes, I can. So the Arvest property is the parcel that the lift station will be located on, and it is generally in this area, more or less.
And why was it necessary to use condemnation?
I'm not entirely sure.
It was actually more of a money issue that they couldn't decide on they agreed that that's the appropriate use. but they wanted to argue about what the cost was. So what was done was the condemnation was allowed to proceed. These are sometimes called friendly, so in what they call immediate possession was granted. And the judge issued immediate possession for the district to take the parcel with the intent that the actual value of that would be determined at a later date. And there was no objection to the intent. The objection was over what was going to be paid for it. So that's the reason for it.
Property owners objected.
The property owners objected to the cost. They didn't object to the use, but they couldn't agree on the cost. So the way to deal with that is to allow for what we call granting of immediate possession, and then you sit there and you fight it out what the cost is later on in court.
Yeah, I understand.
It's pretty typically used. So.
Other questions?
Yeah, I was on the council when this whole thing went forward and went down on the Fountain City Council when Jim Morley, and of course, we had to go to the insurance companies, the bonding companies, and I mean, it was a horrendous deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I see he is the manager. Am I reading this right, of the district? Is he also the developer?
So, yes, he is the developer, and my understanding is that until there are residents in the district is essentially developer-run. Once there are residents, then it will be turned over to the residents who will be elected to the board of the district and who will run the district.
I don't know what to tell you, but I mean, it was a horrendous deal for us. Greg would not have known that. He was, not on the council at the time. And we're still suffering. We have not recovered. Apple Tree Golf Course has not recovered.
Were the bonds actually defaulted on?
Yeah. So we had to, and it took us a long time to deal. I think it was 3 different insurance companies going through the bonds. And it took us a very long time to get through it. If it were in Fountain, I can't imagine what would happen.
Most of the property is still tied up. The development that was slated and paid for has not been done.
And we have residents that around the Apple Tree Golf Course that are just, furious.
Mm-hmm.
I would be very nervous about this because of the very bad experience that Fountain had. So,
And unfortunately, there's not much I can
I know
do
that.
to reassure you other than that,
I
they're
understand that.
unassociated projects, but I
Right.
can understand your frustrations.
But I know there were some other areas in the north end that were also having some problems with him, so.
And I'm certainly not going to try to impugn an individual or an organization in that, but I would suggest that the financial stability of the signers to the bond issue be considered prior to spending a large amount of public money
Mm-hmm.
to build things like lift stations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would.
To a development that may, from a historical perspective, not be developed.
Tamara?
Wasn't.
I apologize, I came in late. Is there a representative of the district who is here to answer these questions? Sounds like you are not familiar with these answers to these questions.
He just stepped out.
He had to recuse himself?
Yes.
Kevin. Oh, Kevin.
What do you know? Okay.
What is the estimated cost of this lift station, just the one that's in the scope of this discussion?
It's 3-point-something million. Let me look it up for you really quick.
And what kind of flows are you talking about as far as kind of these minimums needed to keep the system operable?
Well, let me find the exact cost first,
While
and
he's
then
looking for the cost, I'll answer your other question. Obviously, the phase 1 of this lift station, because you don't build them the entire thing. Certain elements you build, master plan for the ultimate size. However, some of the equipment is built in phases so that it's appropriately sized for what the loads are. But the flow rates that are allowed, that we put in the lines, actually we have to take them up fairly high in early stages because you have low loadings. Actually, your loadings are actually too small. So the pumps will actually amass some flow in the night so that they can pump at higher rates to keep lines clean during the early phases when you develop a lift station. We obviously been through this before, but you have to balance those lower flows at times, in the early phases of these things, and make that work so you create velocities, at least in the middle of the night, so that you get the high velocity to flush the lines, and at the same time managing it with the low flow that you have. The other element that goes into the lift station on things like this, where you start with a fairly low load, is we will put in what we call a bioxide feed system that is a chemical agent that's what we call an inhibitor. It's not a masking agent per se, but because the wastewater can sit for a little bit longer periods in the pipelines and so forth, we don't want it getting septic.
Right.
And so we'll add bioxide during those early phases to manage those flows. Because otherwise, it could be a bit of a problem for downstream lift stations. I think I hit what you were looking for, did I?
Yes, also raises a question or just an observation that there will be a storage tank facility of some kind at this lift station?
Yeah, the specifications by both CDPHE and I think that you heard that this has already been reviewed by the Lower Fountain Water Quality Management Association, as well as 208 and the SARC. You are required to be able to manage an emergency holding of up to 8 hours, as well as have backup power, as well as have backup pumping capabilities. So when we design lift stations, we design them with multiple barriers against any kind of spill or hazard like that. So 8 hours is the minimum holding that you're required to have, so that if you have A, failure of all your pumps, B, failure of all your power, C, failure of your backup generator to back up the power, and failure, you still have 8 hours of capacity within which you could bring in a temporary pump, and there's these connections that you can bring in a mobile unit. So 8 hours, I think, is the answer to what they're looking for.
Okay.
And by the way, on the funding, somebody asked about funding earlier. The funding mechanism is in your packages. I think you all received it. Yeah, that gets reviewed at the 208 level, water quality level. It will be reviewed at the state CDPHE level, and it's also reviewed through the county 1041 process.
The funding
mechanism.
Okay.
Did all of you people receive the PDFs of this submittal?
No, unfortunately.
It's linked. It was linked up. It's linked up in the package.
The document was too large to attach, so it's a link you have to download.
On your sheet, I think it's this URL. Yeah, this is the document.
Yeah.
And like I say, I got through about 15 pages of it and realized that I had no idea what you all were talking about.
This is interesting, though.
It has the whole funding mechanism is in there in all those exhibits, which...
Vince?
Our concern is water quality. That's the only thing we're really addressing here. Is that correct? We're not worried about the funding mechanisms and reputation.
Well, I'm hearing concerns voiced by two people with some experience that raises concerns in their mind about the viability of the entire operation, the development and everything. Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
Yes. And I think my question before, I think water quality is a big piece, is the piece that we're concerned about. But I would be interested, can you specifically address what Mr. Morley's role is in how this project would go forward?
Well, before we go down, I guess as a person that brought up the question and the issue, I'm probably hesitant to discuss someone's finances when those facts aren't really in evidence. I looked at it more as a question as to has anyone looked into prior development and past developments done by the group? I'm about to go look at the funding mechanism, but there are instances where development projects do fail, not on the basis of the individual involved, but on the basis of banks failing and things like that. And there was some of that went on down
Some
the
of it.
fountain.
Some
There
of
was a relatively large bank failure in the middle of it, which questioned some of the financing, and then there was some defaults on bonds as a result of some instability in cash flow. And so whether that was the result of that particular individual or a series of circumstances, I'm not going to bring up one way or the other, because it's not in my purview, although I'm about to go dig into our funding mechanism here and see. My concern is the financial viability of the project, and so that's a big piece. And a secondary concern is we know that Cherokee and Woodman Hills are both under compliance orders now, and I was going to ask, are you satisfied that they'll be able to get up to standards in order to handle this?
They're in compliance with their compliance schedules.
Okay.
The capacities are there. Obviously, when you put a lift station on, one of the things that the state recognizes, keep in mind that the ultimate authority here is CDPHE.
Yeah.
And CDPHE is the entity can say yes or no to a lift station. And they look at, of course, all aspects. They do not look at one of the things you mentioned, which was some personal finances of an individual. They do not look at history of development. That's not on their list. It's not on 208's list. It's not on CDPHE's. And it's not in the 1041. It's kind of off limits. But to answer the question about the viability of the development, that obviously has to do with Sterling Ranch's where they're proceeding through El Paso County with the development issues. This is only the lift station itself necessary to support the development. If they don't approve the development, why? Nobody's going to build a lift station. But
Okay.
if they approve a development, then there needs to be a lift station to serve it. So in terms of the development itself, that, is an El Paso County thing. What we're here with is the actual pumping facility as it relates to water quality and where things are going. There was one other question that was in that, I think, that I
Well,
wanted
that
to
kind of
answer.
removes actually some of that concern, because El Paso County still has to go through the vetting process to approve the development in and of its own right.
Yes, and that's in the process.
Yeah, that's in process.
These things are proceeding simultaneously as you go through that. The other question I thought I heard, and if I don't get the right individual, and I'm answering what I thought I remember, was Mr. Morley's involvement, what his role is. He's the developer. When you have a land district like this that obviously has nothing on the site, a developer is the one that initially creates, comes in, goes through the district court process to overlay a metropolitan district onto that. That developer is the manager and obviously on the board until that district is developed, because there is no one else that lives there. So there's nobody to vote or hold elections. So what happens is that the developer will be the manager through that process of building the lift station and the force main. But as you move into people actually being out there, living out there, now you have voters in a district. And the makeup of that board may change. They're going to vote whoever they're going to vote in. It may continue to be the developer for a while. Usually we term them, we use the term in our office because we work for only municipalities of some sort, either metro districts or cities, that a district is in the developer-driven phase or in the municipal-driven phase. And they make that switch after you have X amount of people and you hit a couple of election cycles and that turns over. So I hope I answered the question I thought I heard as to what his role is. He might be there for a long time, but he might be out as, citizens take over.
Okay. Did you find a dollar figure?
It's 3.6 million is the estimate right now for the lift station and the force main. Yes.
And forgive me, and I just need to put it down to bare basics here as far as how, because we represent the public or different composites or portions of the public, is that is the public on the hook for the costs associated with the lift station prior to people living in there, in that district and paying for it?
No. The people, the land itself,
It's owned by the
and
developer.
Mark kind of drew it's what, 1,200 acres, 1,400 acres, something like that. So until people live in that district, others aren't. Obviously, the people who are putting themselves at risk are the bond issuers, the bond underwriters, the Dane Bosworths of the world, and so forth. Once and as that district develops, though, as you, say, one of you might buy a house in that district, you are now in that district. And yes, you are on the hook for whatever bonded indebtedness that that district would have. That's how they work.
Okay, I'm going to wrap this up.
The main point out there, if you're going to have taps in there, it isn't going to be, it's what, 6 miles probably from the lift station out to the treatment plant. So are you going to have other people tapping into that main?
No. You can't, it's the main that's going from, show them where the other lift station is.
So the
You
Falcon
get down
lift
the
station that'll
Falcon
feed
area.
into is, it's,
There,
oh yeah, it's right in
right there. There's a
this
huge
area.
facility in this area, brand new $5 million lift station that serves multiple districts, that this force main comes in on Woodman and Meridian right over there. The force main is under pressure. Not much, it's a very low pressure line. But you can't tap into that force main because of the nature of it. Remember, Ken said, kind of jumping out of getting over one hill.
So I thought it went just straight out to Schriever, that area.
Oh, no, from there, everything's all in.
Yep.
From this point, there's a 16-inch force main that goes south and through Schriever, and all of those other facilities are all existing.
Okay, good. Tamara?
If El Paso still has to review the development and approve it or not, why are we reviewing and recommending a lift station if we don't even know that the development's going to exist?
Because the state process for approval of lift stations takes quite a long time. And in order for the permit to be in place for the lift station, it has to be in place in time for the development. There is also a contingency in the development process that will be that the lift station gets permitted. So they have to proceed simultaneously. Obviously, if they kill the lift, or they kill the development for whatever reason, that land use or whatever, why, obviously, no lift station is needed. The lift station has one purpose, and that is to lift wastewater for
Right, and you need
public
people
sanitary
there.
service.
I guess I'm struggling because first, the representative the district was sending to answer questions we have obviously cannot speak because, which is bizarre that you send somebody who can't answer any questions. So that's one issue. We have a lot of questions on the funding. I think that's important as an advisory committee to a community. I'm sure JDS Hydro, you guys have done this kind of stuff a lot of times, so just technical jargon, I'm not going to understand it. What I want to know is how will it be funded? Is this really feasible? Is the gentleman who's heading it, will he be responsible for it throughout the process? I think those are concerns that I have and questions, and if there's no one to answer those, I don't
They're
know.
not relevant to this committee.
But it is, for me it is, because I'm advising through as a community member, and those are concerns that I have that I would want. And should I, if I want to buy a house over there, I'd want to know what I'm on the hook for, and so I think it is relevant in that sense. I don't have questions on the technical aspect, because that's you all's job, but I'm just confused why we're voting on something that may not even exist. And then I think some of the concerns are funding, and there's no one's really addressed that question here. So I can't really review this and recommend it based on some memos that JDS Hydro has responded to.
I guess there was one thing, and I think you might have come in a few moments late, because I think it was asked over here how the funding mechanism is. It's metropolitan bonds, and those bonds are being sought at this time. Obviously, to make these things happen, you can't go through all the development process and then start this and wait 2 more years while this permit proceeds and that funding mechanism proceeds. Obviously, you would lose the development, with a 2-year wait. So that's why the 2 processes occur simultaneously. But these particular improvements would be funded through the Metro bonds.
And I think this is a little different, obviously, from what we normally see. I mean, we're not making a funding decision.
Yeah, we did.
Pardon?
We've seen a lift station before. I mean-
Oh, okay, you all have.
Oh, yeah.
Well, those of us that haven't. That's circular a little bit, I think. Okay,
One
one
thing
more.
I might add is we have never, we've been doing this, as you said, I've been doing it for 30 years. And the reason that we're actually here is Rich used to carry these. We normally represent them at all of the levels, but Rich tended to usually inform this body. And so it was our first time of seeing this body. But Ken, only being in his role for, I think, about 15 minutes, said, would you guys come to answer questions? But I believe that in the past, that's the way this process worked, is that Rich Muzzy handled them all, at least in the last few years since you've been reviewing these as well. The last, I think, 3 or 4 years, is it, that the CAC has been here?
Sure.
So it's our first trip to CAC as well. In so much as a lot of site applications usually were represented to you guys by Rich.
Are you trying to bail us out?
No, actually, I can address that a little bit. What Rich generally did was say the water quality recommended this, do you wish to concur with that, is how he approached it. But I understand the water quality didn't recommendation?
No, they've already, I think SARC has already recommended, Lower Fountain Water Quality Management has already recommended. 208, although they reviewed it today and had no questions, they did not have a quorum to make the final, but they had no objections. So
That was my exact question, because based on the letter, there was supposed to be a verbal report on the recommendation today. There was none? I guess I missed that part.
Because the absence of a quorum.
Okay.
Yeah, we did. There was not a quorum of the Water Quality Management Committee meeting at 1:30 today, so the members that did attend did discuss the issue, how the responses were addressed, and they were satisfied as individuals, as I say, and it was brought out that there was still one signature missing that was mentioned in the attached memo, and so that still needs to be obtained, but there could not be an official recommendation by the committee because there was no quorum. So, and we will poll the rest of the members to see if any of them have any individual responses for those that didn't show up. But we can't, there will never be an official recommendation because there was no quorum. Okay.
Well,
All right, Hal, finish your thought.
okay, I'm going to make a motion that we table this subject until we get a recommendation from the Water Quality Management Committee.
Second?
I mean, I think that's the next step in this process, and then we're after that.
Okay. The discussion of the motion. Scott?
I can't discuss the motion because I had a question that was pertinent to fiduciary, that I thought I could solve some of the fiduciary questions, but
I don't have
it's
any
not
question.
pertinent to the motion, so.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think, any other comments about that,
You mean the motion in particular?
to the motion? Okay, we'll have a vote. Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, we have one opposed. Who, John, was that you? Was that you that voted no? Okay. So that motion carries, and the subject will be tabled pending a recommendation from the, what is it, the Water Quality?
Water Quality Management Committee.
All right.
They say yay, we say yay, and we don't have to go through this for another 30 minutes.
That's right.
Right.
That's
I think
I think
that's
the only
my
thing that would be
point.
pending is we wouldn't have the same discussion then, okay?
Just as a point of clarification to fiduciary responsibility, the only way the public would actually become liable for any of this is if both the underwriters and the insurers both defaulted on the bonds, which is an incredibly unusual situation. You'd have to lose both a bank and an insurance company in order for that default to happen. If the individuals defaulted or became financially unsound, that puts the insurance company then on the hook to pay the bond. They may fight over it, but that's why you have an insurance company to do that. So it would be a
And
very
it is a
unusual
fight.
case
Okay.
that taxpayers would be liable for.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
no, that's,
I think we do need to wait for that.
It was good.
So appreciate it very much. Appreciate your information and your time here, and we will be poised for the formal recommendation. All right, item 7. Mr. Casper. Tip Amendment 8 is what I have here. You're going to just inform us. That's the only action item we have.
Nope. The next item 8 is an action item. Well, it's a discussion, but it's going to require action.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, the debrief.
Tip Amendment 8 was putting if you recall, with the new Federal Monetary Information System, FEMAS, CDOT had to change how they dealt with projects and their ability to extend the project's life without formal action was somewhat curtailed. So Federal Highway looked at the projects and said, these projects are delayed. They took the money out automatically, as they are capable of doing. The Tip Amendment 8 was putting the funds back into the projects so that they can proceed down their merry path, which may or may not be implementation in the near future.
May or may not be married.
Questions?
I think you said speed limit.
It's awfully quiet.
well, this is one of those that's all, excuse me, but this is one of those that's always confusing to me because we're moving money around, but it doesn't have any impact. So kind of like, my brain explodes when I hear stuff like that.
What governments are good.
I have a question.
No, it's just an editorial.
Administrative actions taken by yourself and your staff.
Right.
What is laid out in writing as to what authority you have to do that? And we had a discussion on this before, and like Dr. Cog is like
$5 million. $5 million. Our board said anytime you are adding any federal funds to the project, it is a full amendment. So if you're adding any kind of federal money to it, you can add local money administratively, but if you're going to add federal money, you need to add federal or state money. 1 cent. The board wants to see it as a full amendment. And since this isn't technically adding money, it's just putting it back, it can be an administrative.
I'm so confused. I thought I understood this when I walked in here, and now I'm a little more confused than I
Well,
was.
the projects had funding.
Right?
Federal Highway said, you've taken too long to do these projects, and took the money away from them.
This sounds like our conversation a couple of meetings ago.
Yes, it's-
Somebody's going, oh, I'm feeling a deja vu.
It is very closely related to that conversation.
Looks a lot like.
Deja vu all over.
So they're taking the money away until
They actually show that they're ready to use it.
shovel-ready, is that the
Right.
term that's been
Yes.
bandied around? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
One more question, I'm sorry. What are the requirements, or simplified, of super circular?
That is a question that we have been asking CDOT and Federal Highway, and that CDOT has been asking Federal Highway, but they are extensive, especially as far as creating a schedule. They are rigorous as far as you can't spend money outside of your scheduled time under any circumstances. They are creating havoc across the country, and Congress does not seem inclined to do anything about it. They think if you want to use our money, you're going to use our rules, and if you can't use our rules, then don't use our money.
It's not their money.
So
Not their money.
that's not how they look at it. And
You
since-
ones there.
Yes.
I appreciate the editorial comment, but I've seen it happen too often. The federal money does always come with some sort of
Ropes, chains.
shackles.
The occasional, yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we just need to accept that for information.
Yep, that's all it is.
You're going to go ahead and do whatever you need to do anyway, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Trying to get projects done. There's a couple of them that needed to be advertised, and so.
Yeah. All right, well, the onus is on you.
It is.
Okay. All right, item number 8, please.
Okay, so the board adopted our plan. Now we would like to know what you think we did well, what you think we could do better, what can be done differently to be more effective. And so we provided Chapter 3 as sort of a framework, so if you'd like, we can walk through that, the steps in that, or we can just do a free-for-all discussion. However you're...
I have a question on the public involvement. I think it was mentioned how you involve the public in the process, and I think Rachel was doing all of that. How many people do you think you touched in the entire public process that, I don't know, either came to a meeting or responded to something or whatever?
It has to be at least hundreds, because we had over 100 with the non-militarized plan itself. There were probably 50 to 75 with the transit plan, so it'd be in the hundreds that we touched.
Is that a leading question, Vince? I thought it might be.
So a couple hundred?
Yep.
I looked through the Chapter 3, and I think there are some very good points on which we can focus, depending upon how much you individually exposed to the process. Many of us played in different roles, so I think that when would you like to have feedback from us? At this nanosecond, or?
No, any time between this nanosecond and probably March. Because by March, we need to start the next process. And I'm not joking about March. We're going to start our next plan.
Okay.
So we'd like to know by about then. But are there anything that jumps out at you?
And I'm leading into this again.
I know you are.
When you look at the last page of page 8, the Chapter 3, it says in there, our role in the Community Advisory Committee, it says, in particular, the Community Advisory Committee is charged with providing ongoing input into public involvement methods to ensure that the public is heard in preparing transportation plans and programs. What do you mean by that?
How can we provide, what information do we need to provide you to go out to the public to talk to them for us?
I would
Along
answer
with some
that
other
differently.
things. You're all representatives of your groups, so our expectation is you are talking to your groups and taking that information out to them. Also, input into our outreach. We have some federal things that we have to do as far as advertising meetings. We have to do an open house. Things at least one open house. At least one open house in a low-income area, which technically is the only one we have to do. But other methods, I mean, some of the things that the CAC suggested, we did the peak communication on our, I don't know if it's on our website, current website, but it's a web community forum where you can put discussion questions up. That came out of the CAC. We used it, I think, for one question, and then it didn't go anywhere. What else? We had the website for Walk Bike Connect to get public comments back, so things of that nature.
And still we're in the hundreds.
Yep. Which is, by the way, awesome for an MPO plan. So congrats to you all and us.
You want to comment?
I take that slightly differently, which is a little more literally, and that is input into our public involvement methods. We want to know from all of you what you think about how we are proposing to reach out to the rest of the community. So it's not just on you and what you need to help us do that, but how we're doing that directly. If you think that we are doing a sufficient job reaching a variety of audiences, we could just do the minimum. I'd prefer that we didn't, because I don't think that that gets us the kind of input that we need to make a truly good, community-driven plan.
And that's what our MPO has been recognized twice for our extensive outreach, so.
Kevin? And then Jen?
Yeah, I'll just give you a couple of general comments. I was only on this committee for the last 5 months or so, and I know that this thing takes years to develop, so I wasn't involved. I was involved actually early on in terms of some of the, where the land uses were and
The smart area forecast.
commenting on some of that. But then no involvement, and then, but after years of effort, we came down really to the last second to get this thing done and get some kind of public input. And so I would hope that the next effort, tries to recognize that getting all of this stuff written and getting it all done and then reviewed, as opposed to written as the ink dries, would be more helpful. And so trying to not get this thing, banged out in October for a November hearing would be helpful.
Yeah, we actually had a full year delay from our original schedule to when it was adopted, exactly a year to the month.
Okay, well,
So,
that's just a general comment.
Yeah.
And it's generally my thought having, I do have a degree in planning, so I have a little bit of background in this, but these things become, in general, driven by staff members and technical committees primarily. And it's those kind of places that really get, the people who really know what goes on with these things is the TAC, the transportation division over at the city and at the county, and they're the ones who really kind of pay attention to this. And a lot of the public just doesn't really even know what's going on. So I would say that in those earlier times, it would be helpful to reach out to some of the community development type committees inside some of these organizations, like the RBA, like the HBA, like some of those kind of folks. Reach out to them earlier. And I know there's reports that say, hey, this is out there, but it takes more. You got to go to the meeting. Rachel's had somebody come into the HBA's land use committee meeting, and it's actually raised the level of people's sense of something going on there. So I think that just kind of attending those meetings and making sure that people know that this is going on, even though it has been done, I think it can be done a little bit more robustly. So those are kind of two general comments.
Thank you. Jen?
Well, I think one of the things I appreciate
Going to write that last one.
in my time with this committee is that
we went to them every month.
we've had the opportunity to comment on things, like when we saw that a project was when projects get canceled, I'm going, and the people not knowing, oh, by the way, that's not going to happen, that intersection or that improvement's not going to happen, and being able to share that with the public. If we're going to tell them that this is going to be done and it's on a project list that needs to get bagged, either because they didn't get it done, the planning done more quickly enough, I think it's just communicating with the public.
How do we do, that's what we need is how to do that.
Well, when I know it touches a part of the community that I have some kind of influence or be able to speak with, and I hear something in this meeting or I don't know that is relevant to that audience, I will say something. And I will say something to people and ask what their feedback is. Sometimes I don't have enough time to do that between when I get
The information and
and then, because it's.
There's a week, yeah, usually a week ahead of time.
And a weekend.
Yep.
And then, we're in the meeting, so I really don't have time to go out and ask for input, especially when you're asking us to recommend something. That really puts me on the hot seat, because while I anticipate that you all have all the technical information vetted, what I'm looking for is the opinion of the people that I touch in the community.
What was your initial comment? I'm sorry, I was trying to write down Kevin's, and I'm no good
No,
at
it was that
multitasking.
when I'm just going to peek out. When we bagged projects and we didn't tell the people that were involved in those projects, we'd announce that these are the projects that are going to get done, blah, blah, blah.
Yep, and these ones are not.
Yeah. Well, sometimes.
Right,
And
yeah,
sometimes we're running along here and we hear about projects getting bagged, and then we go, whoa, is somebody going to tell those people?
And Generally, like as far as it relates to actual the tip instead of the plan, when it's implementation with the tip, that's the responsibility of the local jurisdiction. That is not PPACG's bailiwick.
It may not be your bailiwick, but there's still, if we told people that this project is going to go, and then it's not going to go, we're going to go, I'm not sure whose responsibility is who, but is it my responsibility as a community representative to go and say, yo, do you realize that this isn't going to happen?
Yeah.
I'm not sure who, it's easy to say, that's not our,
Well, and then,
whose is it?
Well, frankly, Jen, I think you've brought something up, and you brought this up a few months ago, that nobody really thought through before. You're right, we're very focused. and I
What-
think
what
that
is gonna happen?
collectively,
Yeah, this is what we're gonna do.
County on saying, yay, we're going to do this project, and when we don't do one, we just kind of.
yeah, it just didn't.
No mind.
So I'm not sure we know the answer yet.
Okay. I don't want it to go away.
Well, it's on the flip chart, which.
It's a little, and I would comment, I think that's a great thought that needs to be addressed, and I think Rachel's reaction is very positive. It's not really on this question that they're asking us about, which has to do with the actual planning process. So,
And I just realized, what like the US 24 West widening project, which CDOT Region 2 director said, we're not going to put that in for a project, so they didn't, and we didn't score it, and it's not in our plan. And there was a, what?
There's an
At the
awful lot
board.
of interest in that project.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people.
It's like,
well, let me just encourage everyone, think through, those of you who had more exposure, I think Kevin's brought forward some pretty good remarks and thoughts for us as to how we do engage. One of the challenges, and I think it's interesting, I wonder if the process as it exists today, particularly if it is outlined in federal highway guidelines, is 20th century solutions for a 21st century process that we need to be looking at.
I'm not sure what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that the bureaucracy, particularly when it's coming out of Washington, I'm sorry, I have this chip on my shoulder, tends to take a little while to adapt to changing situations. And like things like the internet, social media, all of those other things, and we're going to talk about some of the, what Vince has wanted to talk about in a minute, but that we don't adapt to that well. We may have an opportunity here to kind of set some stages. Let's go out and test some things and see if they work better for us. And so I think that might be something that's worth taking a look at as well.
Okay.
But I found one of the things that I'm remembering as we went through this, and correct me if I'm wrong, we did a workshop a year and a half ago, maybe, on some planning things where we were looking at the, high density, low density, move everybody to Pueblo.
Well,
I don't know what
small
all
area
the
forecast.
options were.
Yep, small area forecast.
But we had experts from the city and experts from the county, and then some of the folks around this table. It broke into different working groups. Never heard anything out of that other than, well, we've decided that we're going to just have two scenarios. And, I mean, that's one step. It's unique to the CAC because it was a CAC exercise that we went through. But if we're going to take the time for people who are members of this committee to come in an extra time to do something like that, it's important to provide feedback on what the benefit was of that process.
Another thing that we have done in the past is we had I forget what it was called, but where we brought the public in for workshops and gave them, here's your budget, here's projects, here's like an interchange, you're going to build an interchange, and let them come up with scenarios. And we proposed that again for this go-around, and TAC did not have any interest in letting the general public propose projects. They knew what projects they wanted. But that's something to recommend.
Shocked.
Here you go,
But that's something that we used pretty effectively in the past that brought very different projects to the table than we'd ever considered before.
Okay.
So,
Well, maybe that's something that this committee can support. Maybe we can have a little, we'll meet out in the alley with the TAC and duke it out, okay?
but But we had, the costs, this, if you want to build an interchange at Cimarron, it was, I think, $50 million at the time. And so we we had 2 sets of 3-hour workshops. We had about 100 from the public show up.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty good exercise.
Well, and you're going to attract people who have definite interests. I mean,
And that's-
you start talking about bicycles, you're going to get a different group
The
of people in
bicycle
here.
and the specialized transit crowd came out in droves for that exercise.
As we saw. Okay, any other comments or questions?
That may be a
And-
new definition for an advisory committee, is to actually do some things like that.
Yeah. Another committee.
Just, not just wait for a list to come to us, but generate a list or two.
Are there any other comments? If you have any comments, send an email to me or Rachel, either one. We want to make the next process. We want to start it. We've got to get it fleshed out in the next couple of months. The first thing that will be on the agenda is actually one of your principal jobs, which is the public participation plan, PPP, is how we're going to do that outreach. That is the first with the bullet, and the second is actually the small area forecast. So, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Item number 10. And you have a nice page and a half summary.
Yeah, I tried to put together kind of a summary of the discussion we had a couple of months ago. And I think all of this ties together. The basis of this thing came from this Arizona town hall, that they started back in the 60s, and they're still doing it in a very antiquated way. They bring people together, they do a research paper, they have about 150 people discuss this stuff, and they come up with solutions that they provide to decision makers. They're non-binding. You don't have to take them. But a lot of people have put a lot of thought in these kinds of things. And I want to take this up another notch and probably bring it into what we're talking about here. The key is educating people. I think there's a lot of things that we do in our region, in the state, probably in the United States, where things come about and people don't really have a full understanding of the topic. If we were to go into a discussion right now on Tabor, everybody would have an opinion on it, but very few people would really understand the guts of Tabor, what it's all about. So we're coming from different perches, and what we need to do is get everybody to that same perch, that same level, by providing education that is in the way of an unbiased product from somebody. It could be a university, it could be whatever, and Tabor would be an example. The unbiased thing would be the report that's being done here on the transportation plan. So you have this body of information, and then what you do, and what we're doing here in this room, it's kind of interesting, is it's interactive. I'll say something, and then Tamara will say something, and then Jim will say something, and Rachel will say something, and then Scott will say something, and you're thinking, and you're building on that whole kind of thing. But what happens in these plans is you send them out, and people are responding, and they're not getting the responses from the other people. You're not seeing what other people are saying until the end. Then you put all that information together. Oh man, if I'd seen that spurs another discussion for me. So what I'm looking here is a way to put all of that together. So you have the education, you get everybody to the same perch, and then kind of like a blog, if you go into the Gazette or any other place and they have an article there, somebody comments on it, then another person comments. Some people get pretty wild on these kinds of things, so you have to have moderators or else it just goes ape. But if you have, a civil discussion on these kinds of things, I think you can probably beat up an issue pretty well, and you can come up with all of the things from one end of the spectrum to the other. And that would be the intent of what I'm trying to propose here. And it's an electronic way of doing it. Instead of having 100 people or 200 people come into a topic, we have 1,200 people, or we have 12,000 people get involved in it. And I think when you have more people involved, I think you're going to have civic engagement, you're going to have better discussions, you're probably going to have a better solution coming out of that than just a couple hundred people. And maybe those couple hundred people were really only 10 people that had 20 questions each or whatever else. You don't know
when you get these kinds of comments. So, and then the other part here is, I think that's part of our task here. When I look through, the statement that we receive, or the paper that we receive every month as far as our, who's on the CAC and what our duties are, I think just about half of those duties relate to what I'm talking about here. It's our job to come up with new ways of doing things, to get more people involved, to get the information out. And then I brought up this, the citizens advisory thing, public involvement methods. We're to create new public involvement methods. How do we do that? This would be a way of doing this. Now, I'm not providing a solution here. All I want to do is really set up some sort of a subcommittee, task force, as Bob called it, Skunk Works, and you can go on to Google and figure out what Skunk Works are. But just a way of beating up the way to get the process started, and then from that, to move into taking on problems and trying to solve those kinds of problems through this methodology. I think the Arizona Town Hall is really cool the way they've done this thing, but we can build on it. That's 1960s technology. They really haven't advanced it. They made a website, but they haven't taken social media and used that to its best advantage. ISIS. We've all heard about ISIS. They're using social media to run their whole program. I mean, that's a powerful methodology. I'm not looking at doing what they're doing, but using social media, I went in a discussion last night. That's scary, that stuff. Using social media to help us get the word out and get the word back so that we can provide the best products possible for the region which we're representing. So anyway, that's it. There's nothing in it for me or Kevin or anybody else, financially to do something like that. What we're trying to do is come up with a methodology that's going to help us. So, any questions you might have? Rachel.
How is that different from the social media and the website use and so on that we're already doing?
How many people do you have coming into it?
Coming into what?
The social media, the websites that you have right now.
Well, on our non-motorized plan, for instance, we got about 700 comments on the website. People were dropping pins on the map.
I would think it would be on steroids, what you're doing right now, to take this program, to focus in on certain topics or chapters of reports and things like that, get the information out, and then get the discussion going. It's going to take a while for this to evolve. I mean, it's not like overnight, you put it out there and then it becomes massive, so we have 100,000 hits. It's going to grow is when people understand that this is out there and they have the ability to provide input. And the input, they can see all the input from all the other people. Frank?
Yeah, if they already have a platform, why aren't we advertising that so that you get more people into it rather than creating another one parallel to it?
Well, that would be part of the task force to look at both and to see what we have and what we could have. And maybe this is tweaked. Maybe there's a whole new process that's put together. I don't know. That would be the task force job to do that, to look at it.
Scott?
Social media, I guess, in its current form is really good for disseminating information. It's good for pushing information out.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like it's a difficult platform to manage conversations. It's great to get responses. You can read a lot of responses that people give, but conversation threads all tend to get off the track. I watched the last GOP debates, and one of the things that they did was publish it on Twitter, and they used heat map technology, where they started to watch what the topics were and bring out the topics for discussion as they grew in popularity. And is that kind of what you're looking at in managing?
Yeah, they would. We would be focused. We would have blogs, and then people would. You would have the subjects, and basically people would add to that discussion information. It would be limited, and then you would have forums, and you would break the topics down into little pieces, and people would work on those forum items, which would be in more detail. So I look at both of those.
Where the topics are trending in concentration.
You have moderators
and engage those people to actually discuss that area.
I would have moderators in there as well to help move it along, as they do with this Arizona Town Hall.
They have facilitators, moderators. They get a group of 10 or 15 people. And you know, they kind of structured the discussion to make sure it stays online and doesn't go off and talk about whatever.
It's like the next generation of social media is two-way interaction.
That's what I'm looking for here is two-way.
This sounds exactly like the open town hall we have already from Peak Democracy. Where it was a CAC suggestion about a year and a half ago that we got. And we used it once or twice, but it didn't catch. But yeah, look up Open Town Hall by Peak Democracy.
Okay.
Jen, or did you just twitch?
Well, I guess, one of the things I've never been afraid of is trying something new, so that's not an issue. I guess one of the things I would want to see before you put a lot of, any of this, and I mean you, I mean all of this, put a lot of time and effort into is that what would you consider a success? And what kind of pilot would you do to determine this was working or it's not working? And then when will you go, maybe we already have something like this. And what kind of structure would you put around it to make it go? And when would you decide whether it was a wild success or maybe this wasn't the right thing? Because one of the things that when I look at any project is, what's the end game? And what's the measure of the end game?
Well, my feeling is, number one, I would like to see people educated on important topics. As many people out there. Now, some people just don't have the time, don't care, not are interested. But at least you're getting the information out. I find going to different topics, whether it's Tabor, Gallagher, stormwater, any of those others, it's real hard. I've got to spend a lot of time digging into the internet to pull this information together. And what we would do is and some of it's very biased. You go, holy cow, they're off on the right side and these people are on the left side. And, what is really the truth here is to get information out there that is as unbiased as possible. You're going to have people commenting on it to determine whether it's biased or not, but to educate people on the important topics in our community. Right now, it would be the important topics that we have here in the PPACG that we're responsible for. The military side of things, water quality, the transportation, aging, and all those kinds of things, and to educate the people on those kinds of things that are important to PPACG, to the Council of the Governments, and have them be able to provide input on those items and feel like they're being listened to. So they provide the information, other people are commenting on it, we're commenting on it. Instead of just having, 30-some people here involved in it, having 30,000 people involved.
Kevin?
300.
Yeah, you asked about what could we do to create a measurable outcome. We have at least two processes that are running at PPACG right now that in 6 months we could probably create some impact on. One is this plan that we were just talked about. Can we figure out a way to buy whatever the date is that we have a public participation plan due to create a robust, a plan for a robust involvement in that process. So can we expand on the town hall idea, the telephone town hall idea, the social media town hall ideas, those kind of things? Can a group of us get together, help Rachel and help Craig come up with a really whiz-bang proposal about how to make this really a state-of-the-art kind of thing? The other is the joint land use study that the PPACG is starting, and there's a lot of military in the area that are involved with land use issues around the air bases and that sort of thing. They always become hot topics only when they try to do something rather than during the land use planning process. But those are two places where we could look out what's the state of the art. This little group could say, what is the state of the art? What have other places done that worked, or were really got a lot of people involved? Second, what are other people doing in the community? And I know there are others. The city council is using a survey platform to get some information. Got that Springs Insight Exchange that's using a survey kind of a type of thing. United Way is using a whole different model for community engagement. Is there a way to build off of those platforms and integrate those platforms into a proposal, for any of these things for public input? I mean, this is our job. Our job is to give public input, but it's also try to find ways to expand that and get the information out there and get a two-way dialogue going. So I think it's a very timely to put together folks, see what we can do, come up with some ideas, and see if we can impact those, at least those two. And I'm happy to serve on a skunk committee. People call me.
Be the head skunk.
I've been called worse.
All those items will come to the CAC as a whole already.
Yeah.
So what would the committee do that would be different from?
Just a little bit more focus on it rather than have you guys do it. We could provide some additional information, resources, thoughts, ideas, support.
I think that was one of the questions that was brought up when we first discussed this is, how big is the scope for the CAC? Traditionally, we've got focus on 4 or 5 different issues, transportation being the primary. Whether that ought to be or not is one question. But there's already groups doing aging, doing other pieces out there. So I think it is a valid question that does need an answer. Do we try to create something that is all of the potential items or subjects that we might be interested in, or do we stay focused in our little area? And is there overlap, and then is there redundancy, which I think is one of the questions that you're raising, Rachel. So.
Okay. Michelle?
So I think it's great to try and get folks involved in our processes and in what's going on. But at what point do we spend more time and energy trying to get more people who aren't interested to get interested and come into the process, that we are wasting more of our time doing something that, quite frankly, is non-productive? Because you're coming from a premise that we're not getting enough input. Everything that we've done with PPACG, that Rachel's done, everything Craig's done, everything we've done on the transportation plans, we haven't gotten enough input. And that's probably true to a certain extent. But, personally, I know I've sent out probably well over, emails to well over 50, 75 people that I know to say, hey, this is what's going on with the regional transportation plan. Here's where you can get more information. Call me email me if you have any questions. Everything, the weighting criteria. I send it out. You know how many responses I got out of 75 emails? 4.
It's astonishing.
I know. I actually got 4. I was like, wow, this is pretty good.
That's pretty good.
I need you to write my emails.
So, we've got public elected officials, we've got volunteers, we've got groups all over the place trying to get people involved. We got what we got. How many more ways do we need to try and say, let's do something else to get more people involved? Now you've got 10 bodies or 20,000 bodies doing public input, and people don't know where to go. It starts to get, even hard to, well, if I talk to them, do I get this over here, or how do I, it gets too confusing.
Too diluted.
Exactly, diluted. And so I think the processes we have in place, maybe we can beef them up a little bit, but at some point we have to say, we've done all we can do. The public is as interested as they're going to be. You can't force them to come and give you input. So, that's my message.
There are several people out there that are trying to provide educational information to the region. Joe Woodford, do you know Joe? Mm-hmm. Okay, Joe is, I forgot the name of the, what's the group that he has? Anyway, he has a meeting about every 3 weeks or so, and it's an educational thing. He brings in a public speaker and talks about national kinds of things. You've got El Pomar. They've got their civic engagement program. They've got one coming up, I think, this Friday, I think. And they do that about every 3 or 4 weeks. It's education is what they're trying to do. And this is education as well. The whole premise of this is education. Oh, by the way, we're going to beat it up so that we can come up with some sort of or the people that are involved in it will come up with some sort of a solution that can be provided to whoever the decision makers might be to take and use it as a basis of, hey, this is from the citizens. This is a lot, they've gone through this thing and they've looked at it. I'll take this and use that as part of my decision process. And I think it could originate right in this group right here. We could start that. Not necessarily will it all be CAC. It could go into the aging group. It could go into the water quality group. It could go way out. It could, if it started to work, that we could have our other governmental entities looking at it to be work for them. The City of Colorado Springs, Manitou, Fountain, any of those governmental entities could take this to solve their own problems that they have if we can get this thing working. But it's going to take some time to do so. I mean, there's other people out there that can take this on, but I think this would be a great place because we are regional.
Okay.
I think
Go ahead.
part of the issue with the way entities use social media is in how the topics are presented. We look at when we want a tax to get passed.
Mm-hmm.
We throw a ton of money at it. We frame it in a way that creates an impending doom if it's not done, and get out there and sell it.
Mm-hmm.
And we beat the hell out of it. Pretty soon we have legions of people marching lockstep because more like they're told to, and they bought into it. When we try to get public comment for planning, we go, hey guys, we were thinking about planning some new roads. You want to participate? And people's eyes roll back in their heads, and they're like, no, that doesn't work. I don't want to do that. We don't go, we're putting a superhighway in your backyard, and you need to know about it. We don't do that. We don't use the same kind of advertising, media, marketing tactics to get public involvement up front as we do when we're trying to shove something down their throat. And maybe that's the change. Maybe we need to get the emotional level up to get people involved. Because unless you get someone emotionally involved in something, they're going to, my neighbor will take care of this. They know more. That, it's never going to affect me. I don't care.
Okay.
And so,
Michelle, you had your hand up. No?
Not again, no.
You were doing what she does.
I twitched.
Weren't you?
Sorry.
I would think you talked to
Rachel's twitching, so.
Scott, I think you've hit on something very important, which is that the message, I think, is actually more important sometimes than the tactic.
Yeah.
I've heard a great saying today, which I think you'll all like. Information is not communication.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times what we think is we throw a bunch of information at people and we've communicated and they're not the same thing. And you can have, like Michelle said, all sorts of, you can have the dog and pony show, and if your message doesn't resonate, or if you're not speaking in the right language, then
how many of us read the 214-page amendment to a topic we were being asked to vote on? Yeah. I did not. I started reading it here. And the same kind of thing. The information was there. But it's not, we didn't make the penalty for not participating high enough.
Well, I'm mindful, we're running toward the end of our time, and I would like to, first of all, let you know that I'm not going to make a decision on this tonight, because I'm going to wait until Bob comes back and let him saddle this one up. But the comments around the table, I think, have been very much on a point that concerns me. The Arizona model, as I've been reading, and I'm sorry that I missed your presentation last month, the Arizona model has a structure that involves engaging people at the front end and then going through a very stepwise process to get informed discussion, informed recommendations, and a commitment of time and energy to get educated. I think that's going to be, as we talk about trying to use social media, which I find to be an interesting amalgam of uninformed and malinformed opinions, getting that engaged at a number that can be managed to produce recommendations that are actually worth spending time on. that doesn't mean that I'm opposed to setting a task force. I think Kevin's brought forth some very good ideas of steps that are being taken in other organizations that should be looked at. Because I'd like to know, how successful has the United Way been? How successful has the city council been? And those are things that I would support. I would support an effort over, say, a 3-month period of time to do some digging into what's happening and how that might work. I really appreciate that you brought this forward. I'd like to think it could work the way you see it. I'm not 100% there. Okay, fair
Sure.
enough? All right.
Is this something we could add to a future agenda to actually get some understanding of the available systems, platforms, processes that already exist? It sounds like there's some in PPACG, there's some in the city.
I don't think there's anything out there like this. And when we talk about town hall, city council will come back and say, well, we do town halls. And I'm not talking about the kind of thing that they're doing. This is a different kind of approach to an individual issue. And I think it would have worked well with 2C if they had done that, if they had the time to work that out, to educate people. Then you don't have to worry about this, people on opposed sides, It was kind of tough. What's that?
What, 2C would have passed then?
It did pass.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. But I mean, it would have been a lot easier if we had information and unbiased information. We didn't have the Doug Bruce side, and then we had the city side.
Okay. I'm sorry, Vince. It's late.
Let me ask you, what are we deferring this until the December meeting, or?
I want to talk to Bob.
Okay.
Okay? Actually, I think if Bob is in favor of it, he could appoint a committee. We would survey folks to see who would be willing to serve on it, but, and I heard Kevin volunteer.
Actually, Jim, any subcommittee of the CAC has to have a charter that is approved by the board.
Can it be a task force?
Potato, potato.
This is
So
my
we
right
go through
brain.
the process, whatever it is. That's not a big deal.
Okay, for those of you who came in a little bit late, Al Creeley, who chairs the nominating committee, has been out of town. They have not met, and so they will be meeting hopefully within the very near future, and we'll have a report. So Vince got Al's time today. Yes, sir.
I noticed that Jen's term is expiring. Is that right?
No, I got my letter in the mail from El Paso County that I've gotten the okie-dokie to go into my second term.
Never mind.
Trying to get rid of her?
No.
He was thinking about saying something nice.
Yeah, now we don't have to.
Are there any other items for the meeting on the 30th that's scheduled for the 30th of December? As we know this time.
Is there a meeting on the 30th of December?
Well, right now, we may have to vote on officers.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know that we can do it electronically, but we can invest. No, I'm getting,
Unfortunately, no.
my right brain is saying
Our
no.
20th century bylaws.
Ooh, throw that
19th
back at me.
century?
Yeah.
How many is a quorum? 30% of our total members?
I'm
How
sorry?
many is that?
What's that?
Our threshold for a quorum is 30% rounded up?
7.
7, okay.
I'm told by my left brain that it's 7.
Very good.
Okay?
We can do that.
Any member announcements?
Even on the 30th of December.
Hearing none, the next meeting is scheduled for the 30th.
Show up.
Happy Thanksgiving. Travel safely if you are traveling, and
Eat lots of turkey.
we are adjourned.
Merry Christmas.
I'm glad you're here. Anyway, you didn't get a chance. I volunteered to help with absolutely nothing. And I couldn't even come, so I'm sorry. Good. Awesome.
Mayor, really enjoyed it. Yeah, travel safe.
You too.
Of course.
Now we're planning for 26.
Oh, good.
We just decided the civic management committee is going to do a voter registration.
next month.
We're going to try to start a voter registration challenge with other YA groups.
Everybody will have gained 5 pounds by then.